if you've been overlooked for a promotion that you felt like you deserve, if your business has failed, if you feel like you're failing as a father, if you are not where you feel like you should be, try to put it in perspective that, listen, these trials, like, God is walking alongside me through this. I'm not alone in this. And he will show me something because of this. If I meet him, right? I can't just wait for everything to come to me. I do have to put in the work. I do have to, till the fields. I do have to put in that time and effort. But because of those trials, because of the struggles, that is where the wisdom comes from. That is where the expertise in a certain area come from. If you were just good at it, it'd be easy. And do you really learn anything from that? You learn, your sword is sharpened through friction.
Hey, I want to welcome a great guest today for our series called Game Changer here in the month of April as we round it out and going into May. Got some great guests lined up too. But today I've got Tyler Clutts, who I've admired his work for a while on his podcast called One Shot Podcast with Ben Gibbs and Darren Woodson. And then he also played in the NFL for 6 years. Is a VP of a commercial real estate firm in the Frisco area, and their office is actually at the home of the Dallas Cowboys, so that's pretty cool. And he is a strong believer. He professes his faith unapologetically on a regular basis, and I see that as an admirable quality because it's not always easy to work in your faith into conversations, but he's very obvious about what he stands for and his principles and being a Christ follower, and I admire that. And so we're going to talk about some of his outreach in the community, some of the ways he gives back, some of the ways that he incorporates and exhibits servant leadership, since that's what we're all about. He hosts a radio show there. It's called All Things Epic as well, where they do community stories about military, first responders, just really good stories that they highlight and showcase. So I had to bring Tyler on. I'm very respectful and admiring of who he is as a person and what he stands for. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Tyler Clutts. Welcome him to Last in Line podcast. Man, Tyler Clutts, welcome to Last in Line podcast, man.
Man, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Dude, it's I was reading the intro and I was reading your bio and I've watched your work. I mean, you and Darren and Ben, like, you have your One Shot podcast, and I know you do some other radio stuff up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Man, I'm an admirer just from afar. I feel like I kind of know you. I mean, I guess that's how it is when you listen to somebody's podcast. You kind of feel like you know them, but you really don't. I mean, you just like to add them to your friend list, but they're not really friends. But man, I had to bring you on because I admire the way that you conduct yourself. And I know it sounds like a small thing, but you're a believer, you're a man of faith, and you're not afraid to talk about it. And you've got standards, you've got morals, you've got values. And I love that the guys you're with too on that podcast do as well. And they're just good guys. And so I love the content, man. And y'all did one just recently about making kids uncomfortable, or, creating environments where you don't always, pat the knee when it's scraped, or you don't always, keep them from things. So I want to talk today to guys. It's a game changer episode, game changer theme. I want to talk to guys about how we get out of this middle ground. How do we get out of this feeling of average, maybe this insignificance that we start to get into the mud of? And even though we're doing good stuff, right? We got a good family, we're a good job. There's guys out there that I feel like are in the middle that just aren't doing super things, aren't train wrecks, but they have another gear they could tap into. So I wanted to get your opinion on some things. But before we do that, man, talk about your life coming up through, like, you were a high level athlete, football player, NFL, college, like went to Fresno State, right? Man, just achieved at a high level. So talk about some of the challenges where you might have felt like, I'm I may not be a number 1 draft pick. You know, we're talking, the NFL draft's on this weekend.
Right,
And
yeah.
so talk to the guys that are, maybe you felt some similar feelings as you were coming up through sports.
Yeah, I think just naturally, like I just fall in the middle, like what you're talking about. Like I think just my natural inclination is just to be okay. Like it's easy, right? I'm here. Like as an athlete, I mean, you mentioned high level athlete. That's one of the nicest things that somebody's ever said to me. I wouldn't consider myself an extreme athlete.
Well, let me
athlete.
qualify that. Anytime you lace up cleats in an NFL locker room, you're a high level athlete. Let me leave it at that.
I appreciate that. But I think from just a natural athletic ability, like I was average. I was good. I wouldn't say like at elementary school, I was never the best. Junior high, I was never the best. High school, I mean, by the end, I had been fortunate to like have some success, but it was one of those things. I think I very easily could have just been comfortable. But I mean, honestly, I just think God put it on my heart early on to want to strive for more. Like at 4 years old, I mean, I literally remember playing football at the park across the street from my house in Vacaville, California. I remember saying, I'm going to be Tom Rathman when I grow up. And I think anybody that's like under 35 is like, who is Tom Rathman? Like, no idea who that is. Well, he was a fullback for the San Francisco 49ers in the late 80s and early 90s, right? He's just like a legend as a fullback. And it was like, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So there was just like, you talk about that extra gear. Like, I think that was like, that passion to want to play football and play on Sundays, I think was initiated early on in my life. And so, yes, maybe naturally my ability was average. There was like the desire that allowed opportunities to just present themselves, just because like I was there and I was working and I wanted it and I enjoyed it. I always enjoyed the competition aspect of it. And it was just one of those things for me. It never felt like, oh, I've got to work. It was like, man, I want it. I love this. I want more. And so, man, it's for me, that took me all the way through my athletic career. And I went through a ton of challenges, like a ton. You talk about that being on the sideline, and I love the analogy that, you know, the game changers, right? In order to be a game changer, you have to contribute. But just because you're on the sideline, just because you're not a CEO, just because you're not a professional athlete, just because you don't run a nonprofit, just because you're not a politician, just because you're not in some influential role, doesn't mean you can't contribute. Like, you can be a game changer if you're the guy on the sideline that when the quarterback comes off, you're sitting down and talking to him about what you saw on the sideline from your perspective that he maybe didn't see or didn't have from his angle of view. You can be a game changer and not be necessarily in the game, which is, it's like, oh, I've got to be the star to be a game changer.
Yeah.
No, you don't. No, you can make a change from the background as well. Like, think about how many people, like when you look at like a movie production, like, okay, you may see the Brad Pitts, you may see the Keanu Reeves, you may see all of these big names. What about all of the people in the background that you never stay to watch the credits? Those are the people that made the movie possible, but they're not the star quarterback.
You don't see the director, like the guy that puts it all together, that makes those actors who they are. You don't ever see his face. Yeah,
that's right. And you don't even see, you don't see the costume designing staff. No. You don't see the set crew. You don't see the editing crew. You don't see all those people. So, so for me, I wanted that, and I wanted to push harder, and the difference in my journey and having been blessed enough to make it to the NFL and play for 6 years was strictly out of, multiple things. In the moment, I thought it was, hey, I just work harder than everybody, and I'm just going to outwork because I love it. I love the training aspect. I love the studying aspect. I love all those things. Now, as I matured and, look back, I mean, it was God moving me 100% where he wanted me, and in his time and not my time.
Yeah.
Because, my journey was not, hey, you get drafted and you go right to the league. Well, I was undrafted.
Yeah.
Played in Canada, got cut in Canada, was out of football for a year and a half. I was dead broke.
Wow.
Played in the arena league. I mean, I was literally working 3 jobs. I was selling Christmas trees. I was working as a bus boy, and I was selling insurance all at the same time, just so that I could provide something for my future wife. I was engaged at the time, and so I thought it was all right, work. But what it was God. It was God preparing me. It was God preparing me to be ready when that moment came. Because had I been drafted, had I just gotten what I wanted since I was 4 years old to play in the NFL, there's no way that I would have been able to sustain that. I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't ready for it. And so he was preparing me and reaffirming in myself, okay, I do love this. I am passionate about this.
Well, I have a question. So for the guy that's hearing that, it sounds like you never kind of took your eye off the ball, and you always still had the goal of getting to the NFL, even though doors were kind of slamming in your face. So talk to the guy who's maybe he's waiting on a promotion, or maybe got passed up, and, a guy that maybe is, I don't know, he's trying to start a business and he's tried twice and it hasn't worked, right? It's failed. Man, where did you have to get in that? I know you said, well, I just kept my head down and I just kept grinding. That sounds great in theory, and that's exactly probably what you did. But talk about the headspace that you kind of had to get into or get out of that might talk to somebody in a similar situation right here.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's a battle. If I were to sit here and say, oh, you know what, I just, every moment, anytime anything bad happened, I just had the perspective of, this is something that I'm going to learn from. I'm going to be stronger because of this. Yeah, that sounds nice, but that's not where I was. As I'm going through it, it was hard. I mean, it was hard when I had to borrow $500 from my girlfriend, my wife now, to pay for my car payment and my car insurance, because I didn't have any money. And, it was miserable. And I'm like, and really I'm wrestling at that time, like, God, how is this? How do you put this dream on my heart for my entire life? And then now I'm no offense, Fresno, that's where I'm from. I love Fresno, but it's like, I'm living in Fresno, I'm slinging auto insurance and Christmas trees. And I have no money. I'm supposed to be this. I'm not even close to that. What am I doing? And so again, we just did an episode on the One Shot podcast. We actually did a little series, and then I would highly encourage some of y'all to go back and listen to. It's an episode with Jamin Roller. He's a good friend of ours, pastor at Citizens Church in Plano, Texas. He's a younger guy, but God's just blessed him with wisdom, and he's blessed him with wisdom because he's put him through trials.
That was your wisdom series, right?
That's right.
Your wisdom series. I heard it. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a book called The Wisdom Pyramid. I tried to explain it, and nowhere near as effective or well said as Jamin put it, but it's one of those things that, as I look back, and I wish I had that perspective. And so I encourage men out there, if you've been overlooked for a promotion that you felt like you deserved, if your business has failed, if you feel like you're failing as a father, if you are not where you feel like you should be, try to put it in perspective that, listen, these trials, God is walking alongside me through this. I'm not alone in this. And he will show me something because of this. If I meet him, right? I can't just wait for everything to come to me. I do have to put in the work. I do have to, till the fields. I do have to put in that time and effort. But because of those trials, because of the struggles, that is where the wisdom comes from. That is where the expertise in a certain area come from. If you were just good at it, it'd be easy.
Yeah.
And do you really learn anything from that? You learn, you're sort of sharpened through friction.
Yeah. And in the weight room, just as an analogy, I mean, if you're doing things where you can do 20 or 30 reps, if you're doing that kind of weight, you're not going to, if your goal is growth, guess what? It's probably not happening until you start hurting, until you start failing doing reps. And so, I mean, there's guys out there that I think are bought into this lie. You know, there's a great book out there. I want to say, is it Jim Collins? Good to Great. So I know we all in our minds, if we're high achievers, we think, well, good's not good. You know, good's not great. So good's bad. Like in the book, it talks about it's the enemy of great. Well, I think guys, when we're doing things the right way, you know, we're just kind of doing the same routine, but we're doing good stuff. Like, I think we get trapped into complacency because we think it's not great. Like, we have this standard right here, but what I'm doing here is good. But man, I think I should be up here. You know, it's not always the case, because I think that gets us in a maybe wrapped around the axle mentally, where we start digressing when we get caught up in this. I'm not doing anything flashy. It's not sexy. My business is widgets. You know, it's not Apple computers. It's fill in the blank. It's this and it's not that. Like, talk about maybe how you had to dial into some of the gratitude element during the process, and maybe even still. Like, I know, so you get out of that, you know, you finally get to the league, and then you have 6 years, and dude, that's more than anybody could ever dream of, really, like most of us guys. But talk about sort of how gratitude comes into play with the guy who I just described, who may be not okay with good.
Yeah. So, you know, unfortunately, we're in a culture that's surrounded by and consumed by negativity, whether it's in media, whether it's something, and where it's dangerous is in the self-talk. It's really dangerous that, like you said, if it's good, then I'm failing. If it's only good, I'm failing. But I mean, there's a thing, I think it's on Instagram, talking about, you know, the man who enjoys walking is going to go further than the man that is looking for the destination. So if you figure out how to enjoy the process and enjoy just, okay, look, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other every day, day in and day out, and consistency. There's something very good about that. There's something and good in a great sense, because like you said, we're in this culture that you make a viral video, now, you know, you're a YouTube sensation and it's instant gratification. Well, that's not reality, right? That's not, you know, I wish I'm really fascinated, and I respect, like, ranchers a lot, ranchers and farmers. And I grew up in an area in Central California where it's all ranching and farming. And we look at that profession, we look at that choice of life, you know, whether it's a cowboy, whether it's a farmer, and every day they've got to do the task. There's nothing flashy, there's nothing sexy about it, but they get up at 5 a.m., they complete the things for the day. And guess what? Those are the men and women that feed an entire nation. Yeah. Like, so you talk about, like, something that is not great. But those are the men and women that are making it possible for us to live in this comfortable state that we live in.
Wow. And talk about a grind. I mean, that population is who defines what grind really means. Like, guys that get up at 3 a.m, do it, you know, all day. So in another life, maybe I don't think I have what it takes right now to be a farmer. I've seen what those dudes go through, but so, all right, transition us, man. You got into the league, you know, 6 years, you get out. Obviously you've made some good connections. You built a network. I mean, at the very least, if you're a professional athlete, you come out with a network of people. Through that time, heard you mention a group of folks, or it was a community really throughout professional sports. I may be off. It may have just been limited to the NFL, but you were a part of a group of guys who were believers. It was almost like a virtual Bible study throughout the league almost, and where you guys held each other accountable. I know there's a name for it, and it escapes me.
No, that's right.
Talk about that, and just how important the brotherhood was to your faith through that because let's be honest, not every locker room looks like a church sanctuary sometimes, or sounds
No.
like one. So how did you talk about that brotherhood you developed?
Yeah. So my rookie year with the Bears, Josh McCown, quarterback, came in around Thanksgiving. And he'd been a guy that, had been in the league for a long time. He was out. He actually played in the UFL the same time I did. Well, he comes in, and this is a guy, again, had not been with the team during off season, had not been with the team during training camp, when the camaraderie, was really kind of built in within a locker room. And immediately the culture within the locker room shifts. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I was a believer, but I wasn't like truly like, I really truly didn't have like that deep relationship with Christ at that point. I mean, I knew Christ, but it wasn't like I pursued him, right? It was just kind of one of those things like, yeah, I'm a Christian, and we go to church in the off season. I'll go to Bible study, but it wasn't. And I look at him, and he literally was a light in the locker room. And so he invited the entire team and said, I will pay for every single one of you to come to this conference called PAO, Professional Athletes Outreach. And so what it is it's a ministry. It was started in the NFL. It's expanded to Major League Baseball and the NHL, but it's been around for 50 years. And it's a pro-to-pro ministry where professional athletes, we create a safe space. We do a conference once a year. And when I started, that's really kind of all it was a conference once a year. It's this mountaintop experience. But what it does is it brings 300 NFL guys together, and it says, hey, look, like we are brothers in Christ first and foremost, before we are football players, which is amazing because now there's this network, like after games, it's like you have brothers on the sideline that across from you. Yeah. And it's a great connection within the league, and something that, like you said, like it's desperately needed. And then in my NFL journey, right, I was traded from Cleveland to Chicago. I was traded from Chicago to Houston, traded from Houston to Miami. I was released in Miami, came to Dallas. So I was in quite a few locker rooms in my 6 years. And PAO was, first thing I do is I walk in, and all right, there's 4 or 5 familiar faces that we've gone to, professional PAO, and they call it the Increase Conference now. So that was a foundation, really kind of just for my network with other guys and immediate connection, and helped grow kind of into a leadership role, on the spiritual space and within the locker room. And so, running Bible study and stuff like that. But yeah, since then, my wife and I were on the board of it now. We've been on it since 2015, and we've expanded significantly. We have something called Sports Spectrum, which is the media side of it. Jason Romano, former ESPN guy, runs that. We got podcasts. We have a magazine. We got multiple podcasts. Matt and Leslie Holiday do a podcast on it. Nice. Benjamin and Kirsten Watson do a podcast. So a lot of the guys are doing some media stuff through that. And then, we've got a bunch of outreach stuff that we're doing now. So it's really cool to see that evolve.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, I was really taken by when you had mentioned something like that, because it's vital. And so, obviously it elevated your level of faith and relationship by just knowing you had other guys that were shoulder to shoulder, whether they were across the field that you were going to war with, and then after you were worshiping with. Like, that's a cool dynamic. And so I can only imagine that like elevated your level of faith and your walk just in your journey. So I mean, I'm going to assume to the guy listening that's isolated in his faith, and we talk about it all the time, is get with a couple guys. I mean, it doesn't have to be 1,000 people. Like, get with some people. I mean, if there is a convention or a conference or something, sign up, take a buddy with you, or whatever. But I think we got to create more of a brotherhood, and we got to be more intentional about it. And it was nice that it's cool that you're still involved in a big way too on the board with that. How do you get into media? Like you're a commercial real estate vice president right now. And I mean, for crying out loud, you guys' office is kind of a gross view. I mean, I don't know how you deal with it every day. You're
It's
in
awful.
the Star at Dallas Cowboy Stadium. So, I mean, you have to suffer through that, but hey, do you guys like free stuff? Well, I mean, of course, not completely free, but maybe 20% free. My sponsors have been gracious enough to give Last in Line listeners 20% off with the code Last in Line. So I want to thank our sponsors, Gridiron Coffee. I want to thank Armored Coffee. I want to thank Lead Like Lions. I want to thank our sponsor, Do Work That Matters. And last but not least, I want to thank our guys at Cowboy Revolution Apparel. So thank you guys to our sponsors for supporting Last in Line leadership. Go get you some stuff. Go get you some gear. Last in Line discount and get 20% off. Now back to the show. Man, what are you guys hearing? I mean, how many years have you been doing One Shot Podcast? I know it started out as the Darren Woodson Show and kind of evolved into One Shot Podcast with you three guys. I mean, you guys are – it's funny how you guys just gel. I don't know. You guys feel – it seems like you guys have known each other your whole lives. But what do you like doing? What do you like most about doing that show?
Man, just the encouragement I get out of it. And I know Darren and Ben are the same. You know, the One Shot Podcast. So it was Darren Woodson Show, like you mentioned. And that was initially, it was just like, all right, well, it's a recognizable name. What do we want to do with this? It's great to get, we're just starting, but it helps us get guests and it helps us get people just because of Darren and the man that he is and represents. But as we went and going into year 3, I get a colleague. Yeah, year 3.
Wow.
In the start of year 3, or halfway through year 2, we were like, all right, well, the problem is people just associate Darren Woodson because he did he worked at ESPN for so long. That is a sports podcast. And although we'll talk about sports, we talk about sports in relation to life and doing life and just life experiences. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to capture, and when we rebranded, we wanted to capture what we were trying to accomplish. And it was essentially taking advantage of this one shot that we have at life. While here on earth, what are we going to do to make an impact? And so we rebranded, and we do 3 different types of episodes right now. We do a guest episode, and that's the encouraging part that I was talking about. I'm so encouraged by these people that have done amazing things, but have overcome like tremendous obstacles, tremendous struggles that like you don't hear about. You see that they're a CEO or a business owner or a former SEAL or a professional athlete or CrossFitter, whatever it is, right? And talking through the struggle and what you're talking about, being a game changer is not easy. Like taking on that responsibility is not easy. And the second that you commit to, hey, I'm going to make an impact, I'm going to do something, that's when the devil's going to say, yeah, we'll see about that. And so you are exposing yourself to attacks and just, man, the encouragement of people. Like we had a guy, Drew Robinson, who was in the majors and during the pandemic struggled with depression and attempted suicide, shot himself in the head and survived. And what he's doing, and he's very raw and real, saying like, it's not just because I lived. Yes, I had a second chance. I had a new outlook on life, but it's not like I don't still struggle. It's not like I'm not having to continue to get counseling, to be very conscious about what I do and how I think.
Yeah, it's not a switch that you're just healed. No, you don't flip a switch and you're done. Yeah,
exactly. So, man, it's just been encouraging. It's been fun and just so interesting. I mean, I love stories, right? I just love hearing stories, and that's what one of our episodes is completely dedicated to. And then we do a wellness. Ben is a physical trainer, or personal trainer.
Right.
That's what he did for years. And I mean, he's just a gym freak. And so we talk about physical wellness, and we'll talk about things about free ways to get natural energy without supplementing with caffeine, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, we did a series on that. We're doing a series on, like the importance of loaded carries, and we bro out a little bit in those, which is great. But
yeah.
And then we do a roundtable, and that's just the one you mentioned about creating resilient kids. We're talking about just relevant topics. And, one of the things, one that we've talked about over the years is like how we need men to step up as leaders.
Yeah.
And that roundtable format is like, all right, hey, we're sitting around a campfire and we're just talking.
And yeah, I like that because, we talk a lot about masculinity here, and I know there's a lot of men's movements going on right now. Thank God they're all kind of taking off really well. And I listen to a lot of those guys, but yeah, we talk a lot about just the role of men and Christian men kind of being a little bit, flabby in their faith, if you want to call it that. I think we're all kind of, not all, but there's a lot of us that are just kind of going along to get along. Yep. I'm a Christian and everything's cool within, my core four walls here. And then, man, we need to I think we need to step our game up and like get our shoulders a little bit broadened more in our faith and be a little more outspoken. But I love that you guys do the full disclosure. I'm going to, guilty pleasure. Like I like when you guys review a book, because then I don't feel like I have to read it word for word. I got Atomic Habits after you guys went through it. And so now I can go through and like highlight and go, oh yeah, I remember that, I appreciate you giving me the cliff notes on some of that, but I'd like to see, I don't know if you're going to do some more of that.
We are. Yeah, no, we enjoy that. And we've got a good one coming up that we're reading right now. So here in the next couple of weeks, we've got one coming.
Ben is a data guy. He loves pulling data, numbers, research. I bet you love that, because if it were me, I'd be like, I'm glad I have that guy, because I probably wouldn't be that guy. So we need that balance.
100%. Yeah, well, exactly.
All right. So I digress on that topic, but I do want to go through, because you mentioned something about some of the common themes with the guests you bring on is this overcome, this challenge, struggle. Look what we've done, though, in spite of where I came from. Aside from being in and out of the league and kind of busting tables and selling trees, like anything in your life you can speak about that was maybe a significant trial that you broke through on, that you maybe had to lean a little more into your faith, and maybe you weren't even a Christian that deep of a Christian when you went through it. But can you talk about some of that struggle and give some guys some encouragement? Because I know we got guys right now that are probably knee deep in some of that.
Yeah. So for me, I would say the transition was one of the harder things. But man, I'll be completely honest. We're talking about this in my men's group Thursday mornings that we do. Is sometimes I feel like, like I had a hard journey. And like when you get on a podcast or you're speaking to kids and you say, hey, it wasn't easy for me. It took me 3 years from college to get to the NFL. Like you put that in perspective, like that's not a bad struggle, right? Like I've been really lucky and I've been really blessed. But I would say the darkest time in my life was in the transition. And I think from the transition out of the NFL, because it was a time that, so there was multiple layers of it, but my last 3 years in the league was probably the strongest that I was in my faith up to that point in my life. And I'm thinking like, all right, I got this, man. God's got my back. Like we're good as I'm going through this transition. Like I know my identity's in Christ and it's not in football. But what I wasn't prepared for was, honestly, kind of the Job thing. It's like, all right, we're going to see now. Like we really, truly are going to see. And I went 100% opposite of football. And I was like, hey, my identity's not in football. So I'm not even going to associate with football. Like, so if I would be out and people are like, hey, did you play football? No. Like I literally, like, I didn't even want to associate with it. I didn't want to be known for it. I avoided it at all costs. And so it was like an unhealthy way. And I really struggled. And I recognized that, hey, as much as I said my identity is not in what I do, it really was. Like, as much as I said it didn't matter, that like I'd go to a restaurant and people are like, oh, Mr. Clutts? Yeah, we'll get you right in. Like, it really did irk at me, and it really did. And it was this superficial identity that had been taken away from me, and I wasn't strong enough internally. So I struggled. So, and then I buried myself in the real estate work. And we just had twins. And my wife was going through a phase as well that she was now she was dealing with trauma that had happened to her about 20 years prior, like significant trauma in her life. So she was walking through that, going through counseling. I was buried in work. We had twins, and it was just a very dark and lonely time. And I had thought that I'd learned going through my football journey that, okay, hey, look, I mean, it wasn't me. It wasn't my hard work that got me here. It was God, and it was God moving me where he needed, when he wanted me to be there. And it had nothing to do with my hard work. Well, unfortunately, I reverted back to it, and it was like, God, I got this. I'm going to work harder than everybody else. I'm going to be at the office at 6. I'm going to be there until 7 at night. Head down, grind. And honestly, it tore up my marriage. It tore up my relationship with my 2 older kids. And it was just a really hard time, like a really, really hard time. And I started now, instead of basing my success on what I did on the field, I started basing my success on my income. And it was like, and I'd get in arguments with my wife about, she's like, I don't care how much money we make. We're fine. Like, don't worry about it. I said, well, that's the only way you can judge success in real estate. That's the only way. That's the only marker. And I was so wrapped up in it, and I buried it. And it was, honestly, it was 3 years that was really, really hard. And I was a wreck. I was an absolute wreck. And coming out of that, it was the only way that I was able to come out of that was surrender. And recognizing that I can't do this. Like, once I said, all right, I can't carry this weight anymore. I'm not strong enough. As much ego as I have, I can't carry this. I can't do this all. And I can't continue to put the pressure on myself internally, which in turn was putting pressure on my wife, which was in turn putting pressure on my kids. Yeah. I can't continue to do that. Like, Jesus, like I've just got to give it to you.
Were you connected to anybody that were kind of a mentor with your faith at that time, or did you isolate like most of us do?
I isolated. Like, literally, I joke. I joke, like, literally the first 9 months from when I went into free agency until I just was full-time in real estate. 9 months. Talk about isolation. I literally locked myself in my garage and woodworked for 9 months. That's all I did. Yeah. Like, I'd get into the garage at like 8 a.m. I'd get up, I'd eat, and I'd go literally in the garage and I'd build stuff. Wow. And at the time I joked that, like, oh yeah, it's productive. At least I'm doing stuff, and I'm not out drinking.
It's an outlet. Yeah.
Healthy Same outlet. Thing. It was a crutch. And so I 100% isolated. And honestly, it was, and my wife, and there's a whole longer story about like the strength that she showed as I was trying to get into the league when we first started dating. But her surrendering, her saying, all right, Tyler's not my savior. Tyler's not my God. Yeah. I can't expect him to fix me. And so it was me being selfish and focused on the success that I needed to feel like I had value. Yeah. And then watching my life unravel, and then watching her deal with trauma that was much more serious than mine, and her just like putting all of her hope and faith and trust in the Lord, and to see what he was doing with her. Man. And that's one thing that, like, I think as men, especially, and I feel like I do feel like this, and I'm generalizing, so I'm not saying this is every home, but I do feel like we are lacking in that spiritual leadership in our homes. Yes. Like, men, we feel like, hey, I'm working, I'm providing, like, I'm doing my job. Yeah. And it's one of those things. If you ever hear Dr. Tony Evans, if you ever hear his testimony, his mom and dad were not believers. He grew up in Baltimore, and they were not believers, and his dad became a believer. And his dad every day would get up at 6 a.m. and he'd sit at the kitchen table and he'd read his Bible. And his mom hated him for it. Like would ridicule him, would yell at him, would get abusive with him and do all these things. And he, like, the gentleness and the consistency that he continued to show, and he just was in it every day. And it finally, with Tony Evans' mom, was, she's like, oh my gosh, like, I see a change in this person, and God is truly changing him. And it wasn't him telling her what she needed to do. It wasn't, you know, a dad telling his son, get in the Bible, or do this, or you need to be this good at sports, and you need to do this. It was leading by example and being that spiritual leader in the home, and the changes that God makes in you, letting those speak for themselves. And that's what I feel like a lot of men were lacking in, is that we just don't step up. And in our home, it wasn't any different. My wife was the spiritual leader at that point in our marriage, and she was the example of what it would look like to pursue Jesus.
Yeah. And if I was to just, I'm going to put words in your mouth, because I can almost guarantee you would say this. If you could give yourself advice looking back, rather than have to go through that 3-year period, you would say, don't isolate. Like, that's a given. Because I think where the rubber would have met the road with you to that kind of pushing through that wall would have been if you'd have had a couple guys, like a Thursday morning group you're talking about. If you'd have had them then, I almost bet somebody would have pulled you out of that and kind of like snapped you out of it. So that's a message for all of us. Like, I'm not good at it. Guys aren't good at willingly calling and going, hey, meet me for coffee. I got some baggage to dump on you. Cause that's how I see it. Like, nobody wants to hear my problem, right? Everybody's busy. Everybody's got their own stuff. So, but I think that's where the devil lies and says, no, it's bad for y'all to connect, because he knows we're an army if we connect. So I think, I mean, for somebody listening, one of my greatest tools as a parent is being a cautionary tale voluntarily. Like, I tell them, look, this is where I was. This is what I used to do. This is why you don't get to go these places. Like, so for somebody listening to look at your story and go, wow, okay, I won't have to go through 3 years of that like he did if I just do this. And so the blank would be connect with other believers, get in the word, and lean into God in those moments. So, man, as we kind of wrap up, because I know we got, it's a busy day for you. So give our guys one sort of final shot. Like, you're a co-host, successful in real estate. Like, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed in Tyler Clutts' life. From the way we look at you now and what
from
I hear
a worldly
from you,
optical view.
But you're also very authentic and transparent. Like, I bet if I ran into you at the grocery store, this is the same guy as I'm talking to now. It would be there. So I feel like you're a real dude. So give a real message to the guys. When you talk about masculinity, leading our home spiritually, give us something that may be a little locker room talk if it has to be, but wake some guys up right now, and that's okay. Right? I see what you got behind you. That's fine. What's up, buddy?
You want to see a little man?
Yeah.
This is my little savage right here. So
that's the one that got his
eye
stitches. Yeah. That's the coolest part of this show right here. You're the man,
Rocco.
dude.
Yeah, no, he is a stud. Hey, buddy,
with a name like Rocco, though.
You have it in your mouth already. Oh, ask mom about that.
Yeah, with a name like Rocco, you got to have a scar above your eye. I'm sorry.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a great point.
So he's locked in. The name can never change. All right.
That's right.
So give us a little locker room talk to guys, get in our face a little bit on what we can do in our homes to be better spiritual leaders.
Yeah, I just think, it's probably a little bit repetitive, man, but I'm really passionate about exactly what you are doing in being game changers. We have too many men that are passive right now. We have too many people, and whether you look at the political climate, the cultural climate, whatever it is, we have too many people that are saying, I'm going to let somebody else do it. I just encourage, I would encourage men to be courageous, because as uncomfortable as it is, as much as we want, our life to be comfortable, like, get uncomfortable and do the things that others don't want to do. Because if we're just watching this world deteriorate in front of us, like, we're trying to make it easier for our kids, trying to make it easier for our grandkids, but we are making it exponentially harder. Like, I am terrified if we continue at this pace right now with a lack of leadership with men, what our world is going to look like in 15 years, what it's going to look like in 20 years. I'm terrified. And so, you know, we talked about building, we talked about building resiliency in kids. You know, there's a book called Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, just about how we are just always trying to be comfortable and the importance of getting uncomfortable and being courageous in times that we need to step up is uncomfortable. But I would say if you feel that in your heart, that is the devil trying to dissuade you from stepping up to do what you're called to do. Be a leader in your home first and foremost. You want to make an impact on this country? Be a leader in your home. Be a leader by example. And then you can start in your community, but like be a leader in your home first. Love your kids, encourage your kids, be empathetic with your kids, but push your kids.
Right.
Show your kids that it is okay to be uncomfortable. And then as you go out in the community, I would just encourage also too, you talked about service, the importance, we talk about it on the One Shot podcast all the time, is the importance of service and getting uncomfortable. Because it's uncomfortable sometimes, honestly, like to go to a bad part of whatever city you're in and go serve. It's uncomfortable. And it's like, I don't really know what to say and I don't really know what to do. It's like, get uncomfortable, because I'm telling you, the impact, not only that you're making on other people is profound, but even more so what it's going to do in your heart and your soul, because the perspective shift that you will have because of it. Like when you come home and you say, I had the worst day today, man, I had this guy that was talking about this in the office, and, you know, I lost this deal, or I'm dealing with this boss, or whatever it is. Like, if you think that that's the worst part of your day, again, go serve in South Dallas, go serve in South Central LA, go serve in another country, for crying out loud, and tell me that that's a bad day. Because what that does is that allows you to then approach your day with gratitude. And now, instead of being that negative person that we talked about, this negative aura that's around everywhere, now you walk in, you're like, dang, instead of having to go to work and make cold calls, or having to go into work and lay concrete, or having to go into work and, you know, design this web page. I get to, because otherwise there's these other people that would kill to have what I have. So
that's right.
Again, be courageous, get yourself uncomfortable, be a leader in your home first and foremost, and then in your community, step up. And then 3, man, you've got to be consistent with service, because when you can get outside of yourself, you can understand the unlimited blessings that we have here in this country.
So good, man. That's so good. I'm glad you threw the gratitude element in there, because I'm real big about that on here, man. I'm going to let you go, and I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. Awesome stories, man. I love stories too. And so I knew you could offer some stuff on that. And I know you like to tell stories, and man, I wish we could go another hour, but I'm going to let you go. But guys, check them out.
We'll do this again for sure.
Man,
I love this. I mean, what you're doing, I love it. Like, you're right in line with us. We're just trying to encourage people, you know, again, to make an impact, to do something different. Like, we really truly only have one shot at this. Let's take advantage of it. And I think just to coast is a disservice to us all.
It is, man. Go check them out on One Shot Podcast. Reach out, subscribe, like, follow them. They've got great content. I listen to them every week. So on behalf of him, this is Tyler Clutts. We've been last in line. Be blessed.